Have you ever felt a presence in the dark? A silence so deep, it presses against your chest? Tonight, we enter the mind of a man haunted not just by memories, but by something darker. An echo from beyond. A shadow that speaks. A knock that never truly stops. This is Edgar Allan Poe's world. A place where sorrow takes shape, and the supernatural is never far behind. And it begins as it always does on a midnight dreary. Unnameful sadness. Midnight. But not the kind that brings dreams or rest. This is a midnight that breathes like a living thing. Dense, unmoving. Heavy with the scent of memories that refuse to die. Outside the world is still. But inside his mind is a storm. He sits hunched over ancient volumes. Hands trembling as they turn pages that offer no answers. These books, once a refuge, are now tombstones of thought. Cold, silent, unyielding. He clings to them like wreckage from a ship long sunk, drifting through the wreckage of his own mind, searching for salvation in ink, in logic, in forgotten words. But the pages whisper nothing. No wisdom. No comfort. Only silence. And that silence is not empty. It has shape. It has weight. It has a name. Lenore. He is not simply mourning her. He is haunted by her. By the ghost of her voice. By the echo of footsteps that no longer fall. By the way the light once touched her hair. Now just a flicker in his mind's eye. The world has moved on. But he is trapped. Not in time, but in absence. The worst kind of haunting isn't by a ghost. It's by a memory you cannot bury. And dare not let live. He does not speak her name. To do so would tear the wound wide open. It would make her loss final. And so he whispers it only within. Not even as a word, but as a breath caught between grief and guilt. Lenore. As if the very air around him might shatter, under the weight of that single sacred syllable. Strange knocking. The silence at first was comforting. A stillness that wrapped itself around him like a familiar shroud. But then something shifts. Not in the room, but in the air. A pressure. Like the world inhaling, holding its breath. And then a sound. Knock. Not loud, not urgent, but precise, as though whatever stood behind the door knew exactly when to strike. His heart skips, not because of the knocking, but because of the timing. It came not during chaos, but in perfect stillness, a violation of peace. He listens. No wind, no echo, just that solitary sound, still lingering in the air, like the smell of something burning long after the fire is out. Knock. Again. Each one sharper than the last, carving through his thoughts like cold steel. He does not rise. He cannot. The fear has not reached his legs yet. It lives in his chest, coiled around his ribs, breathing with him. What could it be? A visitor? A dream? Or the part of him that wants to believe she might come back? He calls out. A weak, trembling voice. But there is no answer. Just the memory of her knock. Once gentle. Now turned into something darker. The door does not move, but its presence grows heavier. The room, once small, now stretches infinitely, as if space itself bends under the weight of that sound. Behind the door, unknown. Within the man, unraveling. One more knock, and the boundary between memory and madness may dissolve completely. He does not want to open the door, but worse still is the idea that it might open on its own. The knock fades, but the silence it leaves behind is louder than any sound. He stands now, slowly, as if pulled by something unseen, something old, something inevitable. With trembling steps he opens the door, but no one is there, only shadows and night. A gust of wind rushes past him, not cold but empty. It carries the weight of something that once was and will never be again. Then, from the darkness beyond the window, a flutter of wings. And there it is. The raven. It does not screech. It does not flap wildly. It enters with the calm of something that has been here before. Like a memory returning to the room it once haunted. Its feathers black as the space between stars. Eyes shining with something more than instinct. Something knowing. It lands atop the bust of Pallas, the goddess of wisdom. How cruel. As if the bird came not with chaos, but with knowledge of truths too heavy to carry. He stares at it, and it stares back, not with hunger, not with rage, but with patience. It has no message to deliver. It is the message a living symbol of permanence of loss, of the terrible beauty of grief that never ends. And when he speaks to it, trembling, begging, asking if Lenore will return, asking if peace will ever come, the raven answers, only one word, the word no grieving heart ever wants to hear, nevermore. Dialogue with despair. He speaks now not as a man, but as something breaking open. He looks at the raven, not as a bird, but as a mirror. Are you a prophet, he whispers, voice trembling like glass on the edge of shattering, or a devil? A trick? A shadow born from grief itself? He walks closer, step by step, pulled not by curiosity, but by need. Tell me, is there balm in Gilead? A cure for this ache? Silence. Is there peace? Even just a corner of heaven where she waits. Silence again. But somehow the silence screams. Will I see her again? He is not weeping. Tears have dried hours ago. Now he trembles with something worse. A hollow hope that still dares to rise. And then the raven shifts. Not with malice. Not with mercy. It opens its beak. And from it comes the sound of every door that never opened. Every goodbye that was never said. Every prayer that was met with silence. Nevermore. One word. And the world changes. Not louder. Not darker. But emptier. He steps back, not in fear, but in acceptance. The way a tree leans when the roots finally give. The way a candle flickers before it dies. Then all is lost, he whispers. Not as a question, but as an understanding. His body stays upright, but his soul collapses inward. The raven says nothing more. It does not need to. Its silence is a sermon. Its stillness a tombstone. And he, once a man, now becomes the very thing he feared. A memory clinging to a room full of ghosts. He falls into the chair, not with a thud, but like ash settling. The wind does not blow. The candle does not flicker. Time, stops. Never again. The candle has long since died, but he does not move to relight it. Darkness suits him now. It is honest. It does not pretend to offer warmth. The room has become a memory of itself. The air still carries the scent of wax, of dust, of something once alive. And in the center of it all, a man who once sought answers, now sits like a statue carved from sorrow. The raven remains, not as visitor, but as ruler. Its presence dominates the room, not through sound, but by the way the shadows bend around it. He no longer looks at it. He no longer speaks. He has entered a place where language is useless. What can be said? When truth has crushed every metaphor. When grief has outlived even the words that tried to name it. Nevermore. The word still echoes, not through the walls, but through him. It is no longer something the raven says. It is something he is. Nevermore. Is the shape of his shadow. Nevermore. Is the silence between his heartbeats. Nevermore. Is the answer he gives himself, when the last part of his mind dares to wonder if Lenore was ever real at all. And from this shadow, from this vast holy stillness, there is no resurrection. His soul does not rise, not because it is chained, but because it has accepted the gravity of its own despair. And so he remains, not dead, not alive, but something else. A story whispered behind closed doors, a warning etched in dust, a man, a raven, a room, and a word that will echo long after the walls have fallen. Nevermore. We will meet again. In the dark, the story is over, but the silence it leaves is not. You came here for a poem. You stayed because something in you recognized the weight of its shadow. Maybe it was the sound of the knock. Maybe it was the name Lenore. Or maybe it was that single word. Nevermore. Because somewhere in your own life, you've whispered a name that no longer answers. You've sat in your own dark room, holding on to memories that don't knock anymore. We all do. That's why this story survives. Not because of fear, but because of recognition. Grief is a house with many doors. And tonight, you opened one. You stepped in. You let it wash over you. And now as you sit in the stillness after the final word, you may wonder what remains. Here's the truth. The raven never truly leaves. It may fly out of the window, but it always returns in silence, perching on the edge of thought, whispering doubts in the language of memory. So if something in this tale found you, if it touched that part of you that you try not to speak of, then don't run. Stay. Let the ache settle. Let it sit beside you like a shadow. Because not all darkness is cruel. Some darkness is sacred. And in that sacred dark, we are never truly alone. You don't need to like this. You don't need to comment. Just return. When the world grows too loud, come back to the silence. When joy feels too sharp and grief too distant, let the raven remind you. It was real. All of it. She was real. You loved. And even in loss, something eternal survived. If you'd like to walk further into the quiet, subscribe. But more than that, remember, we don't defeat grief. We learn to sit beside it. In a dark room, with a raven watching. When pain takes shape, he does not move anymore. He does not need to. The raven perched still above has become less a presence, more a truth. Not a visitor. Not an answer. Not even a question. Just the weight that remains after all questions have faded. He sits, and the chair knows his shape, and the silence knows his name. In this stillness he is no longer fighting. He is no longer searching. He is simply becoming. Becoming part of the room, of the shadow, of the unspoken. The grief that once clawed at his chest has found a place to lie down. Not gone. Not healed. But tamed. Like an old wound that no longer bleeds. Only hums. Soft and low. On stormless nights, the raven does not speak. It no longer needs to. Its silence is more honest than any language. And in this final quiet, he finds something unexpected. Peace. Not the kind that erases sorrow, but the kind that allows it to sit beside you. Without fear. And so he breathes. Not to escape the pain, but to let it stay. Not every ghost must be banished. Some ghosts are sacred. Some hauntings are gentle. The raven watches. Not as judge. Not as tormentor. But as companion. And in that companionship, there is a strange grace. The storm has passed. The wreckage remains. But amid the broken pieces, he sits, whole in his ruin. Nevermore. Not as a sentence, but as a shape. As the form of grief that does not leave, because it has nowhere else to go. And in staying, it teaches him how to remain. Not as a man undone, but as a man transformed. When sadness turned into knowledge, this is no longer a poem. It is no longer a man and a bird. It is now a map of sorrow. A terrain charted not by roads, but by silence. By the way his voice stopped asking. By the way the candles stopped flickering. By the way time stopped explaining. We have crossed a threshold together. From pain into stillness. From terror into memory. From loss into shape. The raven was never meant to fly away. It was never a thing to be banished. It was always the part of you that you tried to bury beneath reason. That haunting voice? It wasn't from beyond. It was from within. Because in truth we do not fear ghosts. We fear remembering. We fear the ache that comes. Not from what happened, but from what we can never undo. And so this story ends. Not with a scream, but with a recognition. That some griefs do not end. They transform. Into silence. Into form. Into knowledge. A knowledge that love once existed. And was lost. And still lives in the shape of what's missing. This is the wisdom of the raven. Not horror, but the echo of something precious. Too precious to ever be forgotten. You are still here, sitting in the dark. That means something. It means you didn't turn away. You didn't flinch when the shadow looked back. And for that, I thank you. Because stories like the raven are not meant to be watched. They're meant to be felt. They're not about horror. They're about truth. The kind you whisper only to yourself. If this story found you tonight, if it sat beside you, wrapped itself around your silence, then I invite you to stay. Subscribe. Not for content, but for company. Because here, we don't escape the darkness. We learn how to live in it. Together.